The unboxing was pretty standard. The foam packs everything in really tight. Getting out the gantry, which is also attached to the base, you need to be very careful not to pinch the cords or pull or strain things while you're doing so. Although for this particular model, Creality assembles the entire gantry for you and makes things a lot easier, it's still quite precarious assembling the gantry to the base. I had to hang part of it over the edge of the table while propping the main base up with wood blocks to be able to feed in the screws. All in all, it wasn't that terrible, but if you're not careful, you could flop this around, bang it around, damage something prior to getting it all assembled. Other videos I've seen tend to make this look super easy, and it is a little tedious if you're not careful. The kit comes with all the tools that are necessary to get started printing, even a small length of white PLA to get going. Even though it only requires 4 screws to mount the gantry to the base, they provide 5, so don't freak out when you have parts left over. I spent some time checking the travel on the Y-axis. I had seen in other assembly videos here on YouTube that it could be slightly wobbly and have some play. I spent some time checking it out to see what the gap would be on there, and you can see the handy magnetic plate that is on top of this base. I wound up adjusting one of these wheels with the wrench provided in the kit to tighten it up just a little bit. And then after that, you always have to check to make sure it travels well and smoothly. Make sure you didn't tighten it up too much. While adjusting the play on the Y-axis, I found the base of the machine wasn't level straight out of the box. At first I wondered if my workbench was warped, but after checking it against another table, I'm positive that it's the ender that isn't level. I hear you can adjust this by relieving tension in the screws that hold the frame together, but I haven't tried it yet. As of right now, it's had no effect on my printing at all that I can tell. I talked about this right away a little earlier in the video about how this gantry is a little precarious. You can see me going back and forth trying to figure out a way to prop this up to keep it square while I feed the screws in. It was a little difficult, but not terrible. I hung the Z-axis off the edge of the table and allowed me to lay it flat with some wood blocks underneath, and it allowed me to feed the screws in. It really, all in all, it really wasn't terrible, but if you're trying to do this with 2 hands, it could become a major problem. You might wind up banging things up. After getting gantry tight, it was time to plug in all the cables. I had to check out the manual for a little bit to make sure I knew what I was doing. It does provide some instruction, but it's just not all that clear. Things just don't quite line up with reality, but I think you can figure it out if you just spend a little time. All the cables are labeled with X, Y, Z, so it makes them really easy to find their location. One that was a little tricky is this under limit switch for the X travel. It has a little plug right underneath here. Made it a little difficult, but like I said, it's clearly labeled and it makes it really easy to plug in. And here is the faux pas number 1.
Use faux pas. Thanks, Professor.
I've worked with extruded aluminum framing before, and whenever you have a cap on the end, usually you have to pop it off and slide the fasteners down the channel until you reach the position you want it, and then just tighten it down. I bunged up my finger just pulling this cover plate off, and it turns out I didn't even need to remove it. If the channel fasteners are all lined up appropriately, you can actually slide them in, tighten the screw, and they'll rotate, securing it into place instead of having to slide it down the channel like I was trying to do. Sadly, I didn't figure this out until deep after my faux pas number 2, which was putting the spool holder on in the wrong spot. But after reassembling that twice, I realized that these fasteners rotate into place into the grooves as you're tightening the screw, so it makes it quite easy. Only took 3 times to realize this problem. This is why having previous experience sometimes messes you up. You assume you know the right thing when somebody's designed something better or different. This little rainbow colored ribbon goes in under the controller. Pretty easy to find and locate to plug in. Don't forget to switch your voltage for wherever you're at, 120 or 240. I've seen horror stories about people frying these printers right off the bat because they didn't realize they needed to switch the voltage. And I decided to disassemble the gantry because I was going to be smooth and put the spool holder on the left side just under the Z-axis. Do you see a problem here yet? I was thinking I had seen several people mount spools on the left side in order to avoid kinking on the extruder as the filament's being fed into it. It's fed into it without an angle, therefore it works better. And I thought, hey, I'll just do it this way. You'll see later what this actually did to the printer. Luckily, no damage was incurred during this, but I sure felt stupid. You could say I got a lot of practice assembling the gantry. Propping it up with sections of wood while hanging the Z-axis off the edge of the table worked quite well. So this should work for all of you out there as long as you get your heights right. It enables you to feed the screws in without any weird tweaking and props it up so you're not afraid of dropping it while you're doing this. At this point, she's looking pretty good. You might see some ominous things coming, but I hadn't yet as I'm filming this. Right after I turned it on, I tried to home it and the Z wasn't traveling and I wondered why. Well, I was missing a cable. This was not really expressed in the book, but maybe I just missed it. Pretty easy to plug in once you find out it needs to be done. Homing on the X, homing on the Y, and trying the home on the Z. Just wait for it. Gee, I wonder what's stopping it from going down. Okay, I fixed it where it's supposed to be now. Once all obstructions were clear, it homed quite easily. And with the touch sensor that's on there, it homes on the bed very well. It is highly recommended that you manually level it first. As I understand it, the order of operations goes like this. You home the machine, the Z-axis goes down and homes to the work surface, thus setting the Z height. At that point, you have to specify your Z offset. A Z offset is exactly the way it sounds. It is a measured offset from the initial Z height that the machine sets when it homes the machine. This offset allows you to really set the height from the work surface to your liking. Typically, you use the thickness of an A2 weight paper, which is about 3 to 4 thousandths thick. Working the paper back and forth under the nozzle allows you to make sure the nozzle is close enough to the work surface to create good bed adhesion, yet far enough away in order not to rub on the same surface. Now, you can manually move the nozzle to each corner of the bed and lowering it to 0, which ideally should be just off the bed, 3 to 4 thousandths. Slide the paper underneath the nozzle back and forth like when you set the Z offset and check the clearance. If the paper is too tight, lower the bed manually until it feels the same as when you set your Z offset. Do this on all 4 corners, around twice. Then you can run your auto leveling sequence and you should be good to print. I have had some issues with this. I've leveled it around the four corners around twice. And then I run the auto leveling sequence, and then I still have some leveling issues where it prints too close to the bed on the right side of the gantry. So I have to wonder if a dual Z-axis is necessary for this, but I'm not entirely sure. I chose the good old Binti for my first test print, and everything really worked pretty well. I had no issues with bed adhesion the first go around. The print seemed to come out pretty well, and the quality was quite excellent in my opinion for a, at this time, $287 printer off of Amazon. So I would highly recommend this printer for anybody who wants to just get started. Really, this whole setup took about an hour out of the box, and I get some great quality prints, and I've done several more since then as well. I took the liberty to also add a Raspberry Pi with Octoprint to this setup, and I've been really impressed with how it worked out using a Logitech 720p web camera as well. I found an enclosure that includes heat sinks and a fan to cool down the whole assembly, and putting it together took only really about 30 minutes to get it going. The Raspberry Pi imaging for the Octoprint is pretty easy to do, and it's enabled me to do some really excellent time-lapse videos. It also allows me to control my printer from inside the house, and I can monitor it and see how things are going. I can do really awesome stuff like this. I'll share the video where I learned how to do this from another YouTuber here who has an excellent tutorial on the Raspberry Pi setup. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you checking this out, and like and subscribe if you feel compelled. And thanks again, and I'll see you next time.